Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Aquarius Rising Africa. And it's a Friday, and I have with me the beautiful Lira Nikolaev again. And I know you've been a well-awaited guest, but before we do so, I want to just say thank you to our sponsor for today's show again, who is Spooky 2, the frequency medicine. And they are the creators of home rife machines, which honestly, the way I understand rife machines is that there are different creators of rife machines, but their frequencies are slightly different. That's what I understand. So what I love about these is that their frequencies emulate the natural frequencies of nature completely. So I now always talk about my mom who has the mini magic, it's called. It's really amazing. So I love for us to, look at alternative ways of healing ourselves rather than carrying on with a allopathic chemical ways, and we got to kind of retrain our body. And this really helps us to retrain our body to heal itself. So that for me is an incredible plus for this product. So thank you so much again to Spooky 2. They're a wonderful crowd of people to work with as well. So we will be stopping sort of midway just to do a little ad of some of their testimonials, which are quite incredible. Anyway, so before we get there, back to our lovely Lira, who has been away for a month. So how's your month been, lovely lady? What shenanigans have you been up to?
Well, taking care of demons a little bit, telling them what's coming, releasing some of God's goodness, judgment upon them. So we had to sell our citizenship in Russia, USSR. And then after that, we lived in Vienna and we lived in Rome for a while. We waited for somebody to sponsor us to get here to US. And it was the Mormons who sponsored us. Shocker, huh? They want as many people in their system as they can and convert as many people as they can. Well, long story short, I have a lot of family in Utah. And when you go to Salt Lake City, I call it the Citadel. They've got so many buildings there in their cult. And they keep adding more and more buildings. It's almost like someday I can see it being like Washington, D.C., a small vicinity, and then like the Vatican. It stands on its own. I have a feeling that Salt Lake will be there eventually, the way they're building. So I was inspired by the Lord to go towards the cap. And it's Salt Lake City, it's all mountains, Rocky Mountains, and the valleys. And Salt Lake is in the valley, but you've got these hills with certain buildings there. So I had my sister and my daughter-in-law. We anointed ourselves, cleansed the land. We went to specific spots. The first one was the Capitol, and then right below it, there's a park called Memorial Park, but it's also a grove, Memorial Grove, right? And you go on there, someday if we do a session on the cleansing the land, there are areas there where you actually go up the stairs and there's an altar there. You walk to another area, there's an altar there. There's a creek there that looks like the snake if you look down on the map. So, and other areas, and then there's the eternal fire there. And basically, they're just doing the usual, taking the blood, conduing it to certain things, and so on. So we were there God told me to read out of Malachi. And there's a prophecy in Malachi to the evil ones. He said, I will hide the righteous ones, the ones who fear the Lord. I will hide them in my sun rays or in my wings. And then the evil ones will be burned to dust. And then once the righteous ones come out of the sun rays, if you will, from the hiding place, they will be trampling upon the dust, upon the evil people's dust, ashes. And God will not leave, not a root nor a branch of theirs to survive. He will wipe them utterly and completely. And that's what I was doing in various locations, in various buildings, especially down And of course, I did not have jurisdiction to bind things. I only had authority, well, permission from the Lord to release, portals, heavenly portals where the angels could be coming down, the ministering angels, the nano angels, the warrior angels, various ones in certain places. And then by the time and then when we were driving by very, very slowly around certain things, it took about 4 hours. The place where they do their genealogy, keep track of all the records of the genealogy. Once again, I had to read specifically over those 2 buildings. What God said, I will not leave your root nor a branch. Like whatever you're up to, it's going to be gone. But we were also going down to, well, let me explain. There's one street where you have the Mormon Tabernacle, South Street, some South Temple. Then you keep going, you will have a Catholic cathedral, another Catholic church. You will have the governor's mansion, some more governor buildings, very beautiful. And then a bit down the road, you have the Freemasons temple, but all in straight row. And the way I would see in the spirit, there are not just tunnels, it's almost like a city underneath it. Some areas were very formal rooms, beautiful, where they did some rituals. In other areas, it was just damp brown with cages on the sides. And not too far away from there, they took 2 malls. One of them was Mormon, one of them was a city mall. They combined it together and they called it the Gateway. Just like when you're talking about the gateways, the actual mall is called the Gateway. And when you're going through it, you can see all of the other buildings, the Mormon temples, temple and everything else.
That just gave me such chills, when you said that. Because the question is, I mean, it would seem to me, it would seem obvious it's a portal of sorts, right? They would they not have created that gateway area on a portal of sorts? And as you say, that takes you to the different Mormon temples where different rituals are done.
Right. And if you think about the mall, and I knew this before I actually went there, I've seen it in the spirit. Well, I know from some of my things that they will traffic you and the children in the malls because it's so easy to traffic the children through the malls to various stores. And now you've got these 2 areas coming together, the water features and so on. There are many stars. And here in Virginia, you have a lot of Freemason symbols. There you have a lot of upside down stars and circles, just like, and Freemason symbols also, but it's mainly the upside down stars. So we drove around that area, and then a few blocks away, there was another building which I needed to pray over, and it was called the Association AOO. It's the Odd Fellows Association. Did Jesse mention them? Odd Fellows?
I've heard of that, yes. I'm not familiar with what they are, but I have definitely heard of that.
It's another take on the Freemasons. Lots of rituals were done at a specific building from the 1800s. And what they did with that building, they spent hundreds and thousands of dollars. They picked up the building and they moved it across the street and to put in a government building. Like that means that there was a lot of iniquity that took place in that building. They could not destroy it. They're still using that iniquity and all the rituals that have been done there. That's why they took the time to move it. It's crazy. Like, you can build a building, new building. So as we were driving to that location, several blocks downtown, I looked over the Salt Lake City and I could see these beautiful tunnels, portals, glorious portals opened from heaven in certain locations with the angels going up and down. Like, we did our work, right? We did that. So that was that. Oh, I also did that. I was in 5 different airports, including Denver, Houston, DC too, here in DC and Salt Lake. And I also did the same thing there, where the corruption will be revealed and the ministering warrior angels will be dispatched down there to the tunnels for the children and the people. So that's what God said. That's what I did. Okay, so moving on to the designer children.
Yes, the designer babies. I know we were going to speak about that on our last show as well, but we As
What?
is often the case, we digress to other topics as well, which are very relevant. Everything in divine timing and in divine purpose, right? So
Yeah.
today, yes, we're going to touch on the designer children or designer babies. Now, for starters, what is a designer baby? Because to me,
Okay.
I immediately think of Celine Dion's advert. Was
Not
it at
quite.
least a decade ago, right, with the babies in their little cots and wearing um, basically transgender baby wear. And that was so long ago. It just brought me to the thought that that's how long the grooming officially started, right, in plain sight. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot going on before that that we weren't sort of privy to. But that's what I think is a designer baby, something that human beings create for their own desire or their own purpose in a selfish way. But what is a designer baby from where you're at?
No, and I hope your viewers know this, or at least heard it. It's using the CRISPR technology, where you are using molecular scissors, if you will. You're cutting some portions of DNA out, replacing them, or you're turning it on and off. So
Yes.
when I spoke last time, we spoke about the creatures, Area 51, that one of my avatars did. This is done with people. So once again, okay, so that makes sense, right? So if the
Yes.
parents want brown eyes or they had diabetes or
So they're
AIDS, whatever,
splicing. It's splicing DNA. Would you call it
Mhm.
splicing? Because I
Yes.
know from previous survivors, often that I've spoken to, especially when they're coming from bloodlines and stuff. And I'm not sure if it's the same because you were pretty much with the Russians, right? I know these are more Americans that are linked and British that are linked to South Africa, how they would splice the royal DNA, right? And create these. I would imagine that would be the designer baby then from their chosen spliced DNA and create from that what they would then be these superpower humans, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Um, so there are two, just to let you know, I'm not the only one who's been, well, I'm not the only one who's been messed with, but there are two people on Dan Duvall's show, Bride's Ministry. One of them was Priscilla, who's younger than me. They created an embryo where they added the Nephilim and all the other bloodlines. And she remembers, your conscience goes in, from what I understand and learning. Your conscience comes in once the embryo happens. So the child, in her case, she remembered how they took that embryo in specific bubble type thing, and they carried it to different rituals, and they attached the different blood, whatever they did, to her.
Yes.
So she's
Yes.
growing up. Actually, she lives in Africa. Her name is Priscilla. Um, Crazy,
Wow.
crazy story. So that's one case, and like you got a full, perfect human, right? But she was not even born out of a womb. And then the
Yes.
other case,
Exactly.
yeah, that's what it is.
And
The lady
also they like I did actually that. Sorry, I don't want to, but just on the topic, I don't want to digress. But we spoke about this actually on one of my interviews with Amanda Bass, where they carry them literally around in these little blue. What did we call them? I can't even remember. There's a name for them.
bubble.
And sometimes they even incubated in animals. They put them in animals to incubate. Sometimes they'll keep them with men, sometimes with other mothers, and then eventually they will then implant it into their birthing mother. So it'll be birthed from a specific mother, but they have had that embryo carried around in it's a little blue box. I don't know what it's called. I remember there's a name for it, but it's on my interviews with Amanda Bass that I did probably
Right.
about a year ago. Very, very interesting. Wow. That's, yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, that. And then the other one was, this was a lady a little bit older than me. She's American, but she also had Russians training her. Just heard this interview last month. And in her case, the mother went, again, they're bloodliners in the system. The mother went, she had a miscarriage. She went for the cleaning, right? And that's when they impregnated her with this pre-made embryo, who her name is Cherie, who this lady was. So she never had the connection with her mother. But again, once she started recently remembering, understanding what happened to her, she found out that she had bloodlines from, or DNA, I should say, from various entities, right? The Nephilims, the dragon-like DNA, and human. Not her mother, but her father. Like all of that, and it was her mother that carried her. Just so horrific. So just so you know, it's real. You've seen, I hope you've come across various movies where they show you just a drop of the reality, but they're showing you a penguin turd on this huge iceberg, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this has been done for decades. And in my case, I was just waiting on the Lord, and he says, you have a daughter. I'm like, you mean like another avatar or another part, a clone? He's like, no, you have a daughter. I'm like, It's just, they've done enough. I didn't want to accept that. And then he showed me what they did in the hospital when I was 6. So as I mentioned before, to break you, they'll send the other 2 children out to the playground, and they'll do one child, at least with me. When they would take you to the bathroom, this big bathtub with all the snakes in it, and then, me, my head, and where they were raping me or choking me with a snake, waterboarding me with a snake. Basically, by the time I saw a snake, I would go out. I couldn't handle it. It was just too much. There was also, by the way, there was also a hook over the bathtub where they would hang me upside down and see how long I would last, how much I would fight, with my head and not let my body, not die, but give out, go black. And then other times they would actually put the snakes in the tub and again hang me upside down to see how long I would do that with fear right in my face. So like I said, snakes were a tool, right, for them. So this time when...
That's also, aren't the snakes the connection to Leviathan? I mean, would that also have been, because that's the water entities, right? Leviathan is one of the big water entities, and I know often that is carried through snakes. So what would you see the connection there?
Yes, because a few years ago, prior to me knowing what I was doing, I got this through the dream. Later on, I was getting these through visions, but this one was through the dream. I was still new to this. As soon as I woke up, God said, open up Job. And what I saw was the Leviathan spirit that I had in me. And the Leviathan spirit is pride. That's what Job says. So when you have pride up here, you can't get to these other spirits because you're saying like, oh no, I've got a lot of control with him because they're attached to these higher spirits. I don't want to undo it, or else you are so prideful. It's like, no, none of this was done to me. I have not done any of this. So you don't want to step into this healing process. So, and that one, as soon as God showed me all that, I'm like, I started thinking about the various people who I need to call to pray with me, who do deliverance. And God says, no, just sit here. We're just going to do it. You're going to pray and it's going to come out. That's exactly what happened. And it did like slithered out. And this thing was, the way I can explain it, the way I saw it, it was kind of like an alligator or crocodile, kind of like a dragon, and kind of like a snake, but it was so thick. The skin was so unpenetratable, and it was very stubborn and very prideful. But anyhow, it left me, and then after that, I was able to get down to the bottom of other things. It was very interesting. And the other water thing that I had was it's kind of like Medusa and the octopus. She was the one, when I got rid of that one, she was looking at me and she was saying, I took your first 2 children, or first and third child, boys, because she had twins in the mythological story. And after that, she started taking babies from other woman. And she was looking me straight in the eyes. The angels were pulling her out in the net. She was looking me straight in the eyes. She was like, I'll be back. And by the way, I took your 2 children. I'm like, no, they're with Jesus. I've seen them. I've met them. And like, I don't care what you say, but you're gone. You're done. The interesting thing with that particular entity, and I want to say it was Hydra. Years later, I was helping somebody, praying over somebody who had the spirit. Like as soon as you start talking about her life, I knew immediately that she had that same spirit. I'm like, okay, let me pray over you. I dealt with it. I pray over her, leave to go home, which is half an hour drive. By the time I got home, I could not move my back. I was paralyzed, like locked in. And then I immediately understood that that thing still somehow jumped onto me. And I was feeling the tentacles going like this across my back. I cannot describe it to you. It was like a snake underneath your skin. Snakes. It was crazy. So as soon as, like I said, as soon as it dawned on me, I prayed it off and it was good. Fine. So just, it's a warning for you all who are trying to help other people. If you have not been delivered, or if you have been attached to something and have not had the full deliverance, the full healing, don't go try and helping somebody else. It's going to backfire. Not good at all.
Well, it's really because that, you know, it's again, if we just think about energy and frequency, and again, I always say, life before physical was spiritual, right? So if you still have something that is in you or attached to you, anything relating to whatever that energy is holding, it's like a magnet. It's going to be drawn to you. It's like a friend meeting a friend, right? Like attracts like. As they say in the classics, here in South Africa, we say swert soek swert. Like attracts like. You know, so you're going to find, you know, and I so agree with you, you know, at the very least, you've got to, within yourself, before you do that type of healing work, you need to
bring that up. Yeah, we need to bring that up later, like with like. This also ties in what they can do later. So hold that thought. Yeah. Okay, so yes, they use the snakes very effectively. I can't handle the snakes. So what God showed me was, in the past, there were 3 nurses, bigger nurses, who would do this to me. You know, they would drag me in by the elbows and strap me while 2 are holding. The other ones is actually doing the deed, whatever needs to be done. And one of the nurses couldn't tolerate holding the snake, so she always wore gloves. So this time around, it was just 2 nurses, and I was on my bed in my room. Like I said, I was the only one in that large room. The other room had a dozen plus girls. But one of the nurses held me down, and then the other one strapped the snake around my waist. And that was to ask the Lord, like, what's up with that? And that was to take me out and then cut my connection to my ovaries, my ovum. Just because I was already, I don't know, knew how to disconnect when I saw a snake. So that disconnected my ovum from my emotions. Yes. That's why I didn't know about it till now. And so then I saw them taking, you know how they do it, the left ovary, they took a vial, and then from a right ovary, they took a vial out. And that was that. That's what God showed me. I'm like, it's just like, I was very, very angry. Like, how dare they? This was more real. If the other things did not, they were real, but not as much as this one was. Because I've had 2 friends who did that, you know, froze their eggs and then had a healthy baby afterwards. Like, I understood how real that was. And when you said, this is why I couldn't do it last time, by the way, guys, because I was crying when I was telling Chantelle, so we just said, let's just do it another time. He showed me the daughter. She's in her 30s. She also has a son. His name is Dima. Her name is Dina. His name is Dima. I will explain how that all happened. And then, like I said, I couldn't get over it. And then one night, I was sobbing. I thought about even going out to Russia, trying to find her. Like, I have an idea where she's at now. And Jesus just took my face into his hands, and he said, you have more children, but they're mine. Like, don't even think about them. Like, okay. And you, Chantelle, when we're talking about, you mentioned that I had 3, 4, 5 more children. And that's exactly what I saw. I saw 3 more boys, another girl. And once you see Jesus, once you see his face, his tender love, and you know how much he loves you, his grace, his mercies, his tenderness, all of that fear, pain, and anger went away. And I know when you guys come across his love, you will be a changed person. It's that significant. It's that beautiful. So, um, so it went on. I'm like, how did that happen? How did they make her? And he reminded me of one of my other avatars. Her name was Polina, and she was, again, I actually had 3 avatars parts in Kremlin. So she was beautiful, lighter, shorter hair, almost looked like me, not quite. And her job was to, when they had speakers, guests staying there, she would get into their minds and kind of de-escalate their mission, whatever they were on there, when they're not so focused on what they were there for. And then when the time, I would be there for them sexually, and then when the time came, when they gave me the green light, I was supposed to, her, not me, took out the guy. So in this case, I saw this Polina, my avatar, soldiers, bodyguards carrying her by the elbows through the hallways down into the room where there's gentlemen is there. And that was my job for the next 3 months. But so they had a scientist there, a molecular scientist, staying there on a business trip for about 3 months in his late 40s, early 50s. His name was Vladimir. And his job was to actually, so let me go back. Underneath Kremlin, the red square, there are various labs. Horrific, evil things under there. And this particular lab was huge. Some of the areas were very dark, and some of the areas were like very, very clean, medically clean. So he knew he had access to all of these DNA, like they, took my juice out, had my blood, had my skin, had my hair. He had access to everybody's DNAs. He was creating these designer babies for decades. Like some of my avatars are that. Not particularly my ovum, but you read recently, I think 2 weeks ago or so, and I think it was an Asian scientist who created an embryo for just simply from skin cells. And the embryo lived for 14 days, right? This is like this much truth. They've had humans from that, right? So that's that. Anyhow, he has been creating them, and he did not like that it was kept under the wraps, that the population did not know about it, because some people would want to know whether they're sitting in front of a real human or not, or perhaps they do want children if they can't have children, whatever. He wanted it to be out, and he had a couple of co-workers who were with him, had the same kind of view that it should not be hidden, it should be out. And Vladimir also knew that he was going to get killed for it, that he was not going with their narrative or with their agenda. So what he did was, somehow he picked my ovum for whatever reason. He liked it. He knew why. He took my ovum, my egg, and his sperm. He created the designer child, and he was incubating it. And then once he was killed, he had some of his co-workers, a couple of his co-workers, take his conscience and transfer it to this baby. And that's exactly what I did. What Paulina did was she did kill him, and the way she killed him was, once she was given a go, in the middle of the night, she took a blue ribbon, because ladies would wear ribbons in their braids, and she just choked him in the middle of the night. But he already had the plan set. He created that girl, Zena, and his conscience was in there. After a little while, when she was 2, 3 years old, his co-workers took her to his grandmother out in the country. And that girl, actually, my daughter, actually does look a bit like me. She was just sitting there being taken care of by her great grandmother. And then after a while, when she was 7, 8 years old, great-grandmother died. So she went back to Vladimir's co-workers, and she pretty much lived in that lab. She would shadow them everywhere they went, but his co-workers knew, a couple of them, they knew that it wasn't just the girl Zina, it was actually their boss, Vladimir, his conscience, whatever she would say, they overlapped her conscience. You know, you get a conscience when you become an embryo. So they overlapped her conscience with his. So you can have like two personalities, you know, one can come up another one. So in this case, it was always him walking around, and he was the one who was she, but it was him speaking through her voice box, giving them orders. So basically over the years, the plan was executed to create a company, because he had a lot of connections with the wealthy people, the people who wanted these avatars, who had the money to buy them, who had the money, like I said earlier, to buy the assassins.
Yeah.
So with the connections, he created, and their money, he created a company, and I will not name the location, in a different area of, completely different area of Russia, where they are catering this. It's a very prestige, beautiful company, small, but only to the wealthy people, the elites. And what I saw was, and by now she's in her 30s. I was a child when I had a daughter. And she knew, like, one of my, I guess, talents is to read the frequencies, how they resonate with each other, how well they resonate with each other. And that's one of the things that he wanted, because in order to create the designer babies, you take mother's traits and father's traits, but then you also need to think about, like, what traits do we need to bring out from both, or perhaps add somebody else's traits into it, you know, put all together, and how well will it work? And in my opinion, from what, I don't know, I've seen, you can't just snip out, you know, a portion of your DNA. You have to replace it with something. So anyhow, that's what she has been doing for quite a while.
I was going to say, you know, when they're splicing the DNA like that, I can't imagine that they would be removing something and not replacing it with something else, because that's what the splicing would be, right? It's almost like when you splicing a orange and a nachi tree. Your intention is to get the tangerine, right? So they would be splicing something with the intention of creating that, right? So it's interesting what you're saying, because it's definitely, you know, when we've spoken, when I've had conversations with some of the overcomers about this, it's very, very interesting. And it's exactly, they're trying to create whatever it is, you know, whether it's superhumans or super soldiers or ones that can do that. Maybe they would be, in fact, you know, it would make sense if they're trying to create a slave species, right? It would be very interesting. Then they might try to remove parts of the DNA, because they would then think that it's easier for them to control. I don't know. What do you say about that?
Yes. So remember how you mentioned earlier, your inclinations, whoever your parents are, you have their inclinations, right? Like all of a sudden I like fishing or art or dance, and like, where did that come from? So then you find out, oh, your parents did that way back then. So that passes, your DNA does pass down to an extent, especially if you have the right environment, you're naturally going to have it. With that said, think about this. If you have a tool, a shovel, you can plant a tree, you can do something great, plant a garden, you can tweak the DNA, manipulate it to where you don't have these diseases. But at the same time, you take the shovel, this tool, there's a snake, I'm going to whack the snake. If I need to whack a person, I'm going to use a shovel because it's right there next to me. So same thing with them. If you have this tool, why not keep going with it? So here's where it gets scary, and I call it abomination. First, you can't splice various animals into it. So let's say that the parents want to have something more of a hunter animal, right? And they might ask, well, can you give me just a little bit of that? If they need them to be an investigator or a gorilla, whatever. They can do that. Also, and we've seen that in the past, right? You have the bird and the woman, you have the fish and the man, or you have the mermaid.
Yeah.
You
Well,
have
they're
a
already
horse.
making these little chimeras. I've
Right.
seen them. Little with
Yeah.
the Jesse also speaks about how they've done it with in the breeder program, where they have these they impregnate these girls and then they put animal hooves on, nose on, ears. They will put different animal
Right. Features. Some
yeah, I
of
was
them
going to say
live
parts, whatever. I don't know how far they go with that, you know.
real far.
Yeah.
So I've seen
Wow.
it, like I said, where it was done just with animals, but with humans, it's a similar thing, right? With animals, where the creatures, you don't have to be so precise about it, but with humans, you do have to be very, very precise with it. And then the other problem is they can also put in there Hitler's DNA, Lenin's DNA,
Mm.
and various others. Now, they
Yeah.
carry a lot of iniquity with them. So natural, now this designer baby, child, adult, has so much iniquity in their DNA that whatever they want to, we've talked about the bloodliners, how much they can attach to them because of the iniquity. Well,
Wow.
here, they don't have to do anything to this child or this
It's in
future.
them. It's in them. Wow.
So when the president, the general says, okay, we got to take care of this problem here, go to war, whatever, cleansing, genocide, they're going to be lining up just like that because it's in them, right? It passes down from the parents, the desires that the parents have. Children will have those inclinations also.
Yeah. Makes sense.
That's the scary part.
Well, you see, for me, I also love to see this. It's times like this that I say, well, spiritual intelligence is stronger than artificial intelligence. And it was, if I don't know if any of you guys watched the Arrow drop in today. I was talking about this Leah Thomas, the swimmer, and the Riley Gaines fiasco. And, it was really about, are these really transgender or are they transvestite, right? So, it's really about understanding that when we're looking at these things on such a deep level, it's about, I'm finding it quite hard to express myself in words right now. So I'm sorry, I'm just like grappling for words. But when we're looking at this splicing, right? And we're looking at that, let's say that, and I'm using that as a fiasco, would that not have been something like that could have been created? I'm just sort of going back to that sort of scenario when we're seeing so much of what's happening now with humans just having a different consciousness about different things. So it's like when you're talking about the splicing and what they want to create from that and take certain things out, put it in, and they've been doing it for a very long time. Would that not be at play here as well in the situation we're finding? That's just occurred to me now while I was sort of listening to you. Do you not think that could be what's going on here?
It might be part of it. I think where the platform is just being built now, let's say with the hokey pokies, right? By the way, if you look at the hokey pokey word, it's actually trickstery, being tricked. They were tricked. But and various other things, the GMO foods, a lot of women cannot have babies these days. So they've set this platform up already for them to start considering to do this. They're going to need this.
And I think this is what the whole thing is. For me, there's always a flip side. Sorry, that's what I was saying. And the flip side of this is for us to really where the spiritual intelligence versus AI comes in. Because when we as women, I think we have an opportunity here with this onslaught of misogynistic men taking over or trying to do whatever it is they're trying to do, right? But when we as women connect to the true essence of who we are, because no one that is transgendered from male to female will have the essence of a woman. And no man or no woman that transgenders to a male will have the essence of a man. It's just not possible. You will always be that. So this really calls for us, I do believe, at this time, to come into alignment and into the sacred divine feminine of who we as women are. Because when we realize that, that will override all of that crap. That's my opinion. They can do what they want and slice and dice, but when it's like God will take us to the rocky side of the ledge and say, jump, my children, you might just fly. And if you understand that you can fly, so to speak, and I talk in terms of more, obviously not physically right now,
Yes.
but when you have that understanding that you have the power within you, and that no little boy who's tottering around in high-heeled shoes is going to threaten my place as a woman. You see, we, I think, have to come to that understanding, because that is us raising our consciousness. Because these situations are either going to trigger us into going into full-scale war, which is what they want. They're hitting on all our feminine insecurities, right? And lots of women are going into full-scale war, which creates more of that crap energy. No matter what your intention is, if you are triggered and angry and aggressive and violent with your actions and words, you are playing right into their hands. But if you are stoic and strong in your alignment and true to your alignment with who you are and your connection to God, they cannot trigger you. That's how we raise our consciousness. And that's the one thing that these guys don't have, is consciousness. They are after us for our consciousness, our spirit, our soul. They don't have their own, which is why they're always buying ours. Anyway, before we go on a further note, I want to just stop for an ad break here. So if Morné can just pop that on for us.
Healing a severe case of brain damage. This is a little bit of the story of Alex, who has been my client for 6 months now. Alex was operated on 27 years ago for a brain tumor that removed part of his right brain, followed by chemotherapy, and he was hospitalized for over a year. When he was discharged, the doctor said he wouldn't last long. He was suffering from epilepsy, and the medication was leaving him drowsy and apathic. We started weekly 1-hour treatments with a spooky plasma central. At first for his epilepsy, so he would be able to stop his medication altogether. After 3 months, it improved so much that we moved on to various nerve restoration programs. That was when he first noticed in his yoga sessions that he could bend a lot better and move a lot better. And his improvements started to get noticed by others wondering what he was doing. At that time, he decided to buy an exam starters kit and do contact and remote sessions at home. But momentarily, he is making his own presets and even started to treat his elderly parents. He got really enthusiastic about Spooky too, and the people in the village, noticing the difference in him, showed more interest. So much that recently a friend of his bought a basic kit to treat himself on his long journeys as an international truck driver. When asked about the difference before and now, he points to the fact that he has more self-confidence, mentally and physically, has a better memory and can now raise his arm above his head, whereas before it was stuck to his chest. He can walk down the stairs normally, hold things with his left hand to help his right hand, and he turned into a quick walker.
The world is bound together with love. Spooky will continue to spread love wherever we go.
It's good
It
stuff.
was beautiful. Yeah, love to observe miracles like that. You know, wow. And you know, when it's just whatever means you use, it's, you know, it's just a miracle in itself, and isn't just the human body. And that's, I look at that and I'm kind of thinking about what we've been talking about as well. You know, the human body, the human being is such a courageous, incredible, we've got such incredible spirits, you know. When we realize that, and when we realize the power that God has granted us, and that if we choose to access that in the name of God and in alignment with God, anything is possible. There's a verse, and I mean, you know, you guys know I don't read my Bible, but there's a verse in the Bible that says something about in God, everything is possible, right? So what does that skip out? Nothing. Everything is possible. So when we believe that we are able to heal our bodies in alignment with God, and whatever tools God sends us to help us, we should accept it as that, right? God is going to send us many angels without wings. That's what we are for each other. You know, and I look at that in the same way, what with the things we're talking about now, Lira, with this DNA splicing and these abominations that these creatures have enforced upon innocent human beings and innocent lives, you know. But then I look at the courage of the human spirit, and I know that if we have the will, God is there to show us the way. That's it.
Yes, you reminded me of something. When I saw this daughter, Zena, it was too much. So I asked the Lord, well, you took out the other parts of me, the other avatars, melted them away, took them through heaven, just, they were gone. They're my part of my soul, those layers came back to me. I'm like, hurry up and do the same thing to her, like, release your fire, your rod of iron, whatever, just, she needs to be gone. I don't want her to be used by the system. And he said, no, she has humanity. She's mine. You know, I designed humans in my image. So I'm like, okay, what do we do about this? And he immediately said, we're going to release angels. So what I did was, with that facility, various children, babies. So I asked the Lord to attach legions of his angels, ministering angels, you know, warrior angels, to every child that is there, every child that will come through that facility, just legions of angels to help them, number one, and then two, to release the corruption that will be happening through that kind of technology, where every child that is coming out of there will be going back and showing the world, like, this is not right.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
in essence, they are changing the race. They're changing the human race. Eventually, you know, there's going to be, the implications are, let's say the Olympics, take the Olympics, and like, this child can now leap because perhaps, I don't, the way their parents designed, right, to succeed in the Olympics. Well, this child, the normal child, human, they can't do anything about it. So the next generation will say, now their children will say, oh yeah, I'm going to tap into this technology so they can compete. And same thing with the soldiers. Well, let me go back a little bit, back up a little bit here with the soldiers. So what happened in 2018, that's when China said, well, we created the two children, the two twins. Have you seen that? He went to jail. They threw him in prison. So he took out or turned off the HIV, markers in these two children. They're doing fine. So shortly after that, Russia is now having a committee where they're discussing, well, what can we do with this technology? Putin, and you can read this, you can find articles, he put in about $2 billion into this technology. Now, his daughter is involved in some of it, but so he's totally promoting to the point where he said, I would rather have this technology perfected versus tapping into the AIs walking around. Because here, he's essentially building, not just him. Let me back up. Not just him. There are others who have as much weight in their saying as he does. Okay.
Yeah.
They're essentially creating an army, a huge army. Like if China's using it, well, of course we got to use it. If other countries are using it, of course we got to use it, but not just use it, we have to excel in it. So now you're having, like we had in the past, the Cold War, right? Or going to space. Now it's going to be who's creating the best soldier, essentially.
Yeah.
But they're changing the race, the human race. And it's the pure human race that will inherit the earth, not the other one. And
exactly. And that's why I say sooner or later their system's gonna glitch. I really feel that. I truly believe their system is gonna glitch. All these glitchy things that they've spliced and diced and done whatever, it's gonna glitch. And something is gonna happen that these, I call them soldiers, even though they're not necessarily in combat, but they're still, something is going to happen that they get called back. I believe their system's going to glitch. And I'm not saying that every person that is their creation, because the people that I know that have been sliced by them, oh dear, my whole lights went off again. I learned shedding, come back, and then disappeared again after 3 seconds. Anyway, so I do believe, that God has a way of drawing back to him what his children, his beings, and these ones that are operating on this false premise, false.
Well, yes and no.
It's going to crumble. It's going to crumble bit by bit, little bit by little bit. It's going to be crumbling. That's my opinion.
Right. That's why I was reading the Malachi, out of Malachi chapter 4, by the way, guys, where they're going to be utterly destroyed, burned to crisp, right? Not a root, not a branch left. But in Revelation, it has various creatures. Yeah, I believe that they're not metaphorical. They are indeed, they will be created. If some of them are created already, but that much more. But we have not come to that time where they are there yet, have been totally created. So we will be seeing them. And then the Bible also talks about the millennium, where people will live into hundreds of years. They will be, and a 100-year-old human will be like a teenager, basically. People who are in this millennium with Jesus, but then the other people, they kind of have to compete too. So they're going to be using this technology. And I think it's going to be, they're around, but they're not going to be humans. It's a different race. We're not going to be in the same.
Yeah, exactly.
race.
It's completely, That's why they're bringing in this, they're using, but they need our consciousness in order to do that. So that's why they're stealing our souls. And they're using that because they don't have consciousness. That's the one thing they don't have. They're too low to create their own bodies and their own beings, basically. So they need the human spirit in order to steal from, emulate, design. They're very clever. I mean, just because they don't have consciousness doesn't mean they're stupid. We know that they're super duper clever when it comes to technology and all these machines. That's why these ex-US presidents have sold out to these guys, because of their advanced technology that we wanted to use. Yeah, that's of course how they've gained control. Of course they were going to gain control like that. They just needed a foothold in the door, right? And they got it. So that's, I think, what it is really. And you know, once we awaken to, and that's what I keep saying as well. You know, when we can see and not succumb to the fear, because this is not a physical war, it's spiritual. It's an opportunity. The way I see it, this is an opportunity for me to evolve spiritually. So whenever, and believe you me, in the last 3 years, I've had all sorts of creatures of the night try and do whatever. But for me, it's actually become quite fun, because I need to raise my frequency in order to, that's the only way, right? So I find ways of digging deeper into my relationship with God. And what do I do? How do I do it to make things better, brighter, and more joyful? And I'm put on that path all the time. And it's that path that keeps our vibration high. Kindness, you know, being of service to others means you're of service to yourself. When you're kind to another, you're kind to yourself. That's why when you hurt another, you hurt yourself. How often do you know when you've hurt someone with your voice or your words or your actions, how regretful do you feel afterwards? How hurt do you feel by your actions? You might not feel it in the moment, but for sure, when that anesthetic wears off, you're going to feel it. You know, we're all created from God. We're all children from our Creator. So when we decide that we stop warring with each other and we start being kinder, the world will be, we will shift. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did say, the Bible says that he will sear their minds and their hearts, you know, the ones who have been doing the evil, that will continue doing evil and will be on the other side.
But it'll be a separation. They're not going to affect us anymore. They can't affect us anymore. It's like clouds raising and a steel grip trying to take them down. You know, you can't. You can't. It's impossible. It's all energy. We are energy. And we'll find ourselves in the right place at the right time. That's God's promise. We'll do that.
They want his glory that's in us.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
God's glory runs through us, and that's what they want. And they're trying to divide us, conquer and divide and conquer, right? But breaking us down. Right.
As long as we understand that at the end of the day, that's what it is, we have no problemo. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you so much for joining Lira and myself this evening, and this morning for you. It's evening for me, and I don't know where my lights disappeared to. Seriously, they're supposed to be on. They came on and now they're off again. Anyway, and my battery's about to die. So okay, the timing is perfect. Lira, is there anything you'd like to say before we close for this evening?
This might sound simple, but it's effective. The one way that we can fight this evil is by taking care of ourselves. You know, purifying, eating healthy foods, whole foods, making sure that our body functions to where we can have children, making sure that we ground ourselves in the Lord, daily examine ourselves, but not let go and not give in, not let them manipulate us, not let them do whatever you can. Preventions, right? Preventative medicine. So you don't have to go to the hospital. You don't have to use their equipment. That's one way that you will be fighting their system easily. And having children the natural way, like God do, what he designed to do. It's the brain in humanity that is going to be taking over the earth, not them.
Absolutely.
Be action. You can do it.
Exactly. Yay, thank you, Lira. It was so lovely chatting to you again, and we will see you back in a couple of weeks again, guys. So in the meantime,
in a month.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We see Lira once a month, and I do believe it's the last Friday of every month. So we shall see you back then. In the meantime, God bless you all. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a beautiful weekend. See you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.